Well, it's that time again. Another compilation of articles related to 1920s radio. There was some confusion in the first radio compilation that this was a collection of actual radio broadcasts. While I do have the audio files of most of the experimental recorded broadcasts from the 1920s, believe it or not, there are still some copyright problems with some of them. Since there are very few of these early recorded broadcasts, these actual articles from the 1920s are some of the only things that can give us a better idea of what 1920s radio programs were really like, and how radio influenced American society and culture. And I think that's enough justification for putting this video together. But anyway, I present again, Radio of the 1920s. Giving the public what it wants. Wireless age. May 1923. What does the public want? Does it want jazz, or does it prefer classical and operatic music? What value does it get out of markets and weather reports? Does it really like to listen to lectures and speeches? Does it discriminate against mechanically reproduced music? Or does it prefer the reproduction of the talent of a first-grade artist to the performance of a second- or third-grade local celebrity? If there are any persons in this country who are capable of answering these questions and answering them accurately, they are the program directors of the various broadcasting stations. They are intimately in touch with the state of public opinion concerning their programs. Radio fans have in the course of 2 short years earned a wonderful reputation as letter writers. If a feature pleases them exceedingly, they have a habit of writing to the station and telling it so, and they do as much if it displeases them. The radio audience reacts in the mail. This is really an extraordinary advantage for broadcasting. A man who is running a theater or moving picture house knows very quickly by the box office receipts whether what he is producing meets with public approval, but he very seldom is able to learn exactly why something is liked or disliked. The people either buy tickets or do not, and the rest is just rumor. The broadcasters, however, get it all down in black and white. They know. The wireless age has undertaken to perform a valuable service for both the broadcasting stations and the radio audience by preparing a symposium of the public's reactions to the broadcasting programs. The data was secured through questionnaires sent to every broadcasting station, asking for details of their programs and information as to the reaction from the radio audience. The facts given in this article are drawn from those questionnaires. The basic facts revealed in this matter may be summarized very quickly. Some of them were, to say the least, unexpected, and they will surprise many people. First, despite the current popular opinion that the great majority of the American people prefer jazz to all other music, American broadcasting stations devote only 25% of their time to that type of entertainment. Classical and operatic music takes more of the average broadcasting station's time than any one item. Jazz is in second place. Market and weather reports are in third place, occupying 23% of the time. And speeches and lectures are fourth, taking 18% of the time. The average length of transmission time per week is 8.8 hours, which will surprise those who live in the big cities and are accustomed to having at least 2 powerful stations occupying the air for 4 or 5 hours daily. The taste of the American public is decidedly in favor of personal performances in the studio, for 72% of the programs are thus transmitted, and only 28% consists of reproducing the music of a phonograph or player piano. The composition of the radio audiences has puzzled a great many. Nobody knows just how numerous they are or where they live. But 44% of the broadcasting stations estimate that the farm audience outnumbers the city. 39% of the stations say that the city listeners are more numerous, and 17% make it a 50-50 straddle. The questionnaires from which these figures are drawn, of course, came from every part of the country, and include broadcasters of all types, from the tiny 5-watt transmitter to the powerful 1,000-watt station with a transcontinental and transoceanic range. Some of the questionnaires were accompanied by letters of great interest, many of them revealing that the lot of the program director is not as happy or as easy as it may seem to those who merely listen. He has some real problems, and in the strenuous business of solving them has come to hold very firm opinions. For instance, station KGB at Tacoma, Washington, comments in a striking manner upon the difficulty of pleasing everybody. The question, what the public wants, is one we have been endeavoring to answer ever since we began broadcasting. We are ever and anon searching for what the people want, and it's a hard job, believe me. I have often before, and I think it is fitting here, compared a broadcasting station with a newspaper. The same necessity for pleasing everyone is present in both cases. Just as a newspaper must endeavor to please both the minority and the majority, so a broadcasting station must cater to the likes and dislikes of every class of people. For instance, there is a class of people who absolutely abhor jazz and go in strongly for music of a more classical nature. On the other hand, there is a class just diametrically opposed to the first sort. They are strong for syncopation, and too much of the music they term highbrow elicits only some very choice expletives of abuse. Consequently, it is necessary to so arrange the program so that there is a preponderance of neither and a sprinkling of both. Manifestly, there will always be someone who will be displeased. You can't please 'em all, is the cry every program director in the nation is wailing to high heaven. Perhaps someday some hitherto an undiscovered genius will discover some way of pleasing everybody. Until then, however, in the words of a well-known cartoonist, try and do it. When I mention novelties as the feature of greatest popularity, I mean anything new or novel pleases the radio fans. I am always on the lookout for something new and unusual. Since these are nearly always music, it means that music comes under the category of a feature of first importance on our programs. We are pulling stunts of all sorts. They are the sort that make the fans talk about them afterward, and KGB is getting a better and more widespread reputation every day. Let me illustrate what I mean by a novelty. Late in July, KGB broadcasted a complete marriage ceremony from the bridal march and the soloist to the marriage vows and the nuptial kiss. We presented a trip around the world with records. That was a hit. The other night, we gave a record minstrel show with a lot of novel effects, and every mail brings us more letters of congratulation on the affair. Shortly, we are to present a debate via radio, and a bunch of new and novel features. The same old thing grows tiresome, and if a broadcasting station desires to keep its auditors, it must keep them interested. I shall be interested to learn the opinions of the other broadcasting station operators of the country. My observations have been earned by dint of cruel experience. It's a mean thing to say, but there is no audience in the world so unappreciative as a radio audience, it seems to me. They are more prone to complain than to praise, and criticize more often than they endeavor to help. But still, I don't suppose it really is because they are unappreciative that we seldom hear from most of them, but that they are merely undemonstrative. I wish they could come to know that a broadcasting station gets no other return for its work, in 99 cases out of 100, but the scant praise and kind words of appreciation it gets from some of its auditors. Hardly less determined is the attitude of KFED of Billings Polytechnic Institute, Billings, Montana, which got a license, listened in, and from the simple experience of using its ears, decided not to say anything at all. First of all, let me say that our own broadcasting station, KFED, is no more. By the time this reaches you, the license will have been returned to the radio inspector and canceled at our request. We never broadcasted a single program, mainly because the public does not want the kind of programs we could offer. If some 500 other owners of broadcasting stations would follow this example and return their licenses, leaving a few of the very best stations to do the broadcasting, then the public would be pleased. Broadcasting by small local stations is detested by all except the few small boys who are experimenting with crystal sets. Of all the many things put out onto the ether today, the following are mentioned among those least desired. Advertising, direct or otherwise. Long drawn-out announcements. Not more than 5% of the total program should be thus consumed. Acknowledging cards. Addressing individuals, sermons, and other religious services. The churches will be far better off if they will confine their services within the walls of the church itself, rather than send them out into the air mixed with the racket of the jazz band. I shall not try to enumerate the many good things which can be sent out from a broadcasting station, but I will try to answer your question in regard to the most important economic service. In my opinion, the greatest service rendered in broadcasting lies in the good wrought by virtue of the pleasure and entertainment afforded isolated peoples, such as farmers and ranchers in sparsely populated districts, etc. Radio brings these people into touch with the outside world, and so is a godsend to them. The broadcasting stations which send out programs after 10:30 p.m. are doing a great deal of harm by encouraging people to stay up until the wee small hours to listen to their jazz music. KFED was to have been operated by an educational institution, and it is essential to note that many colleges and schools in all parts of the country are operating broadcasting stations on an educational rather than an entertainment basis. As WCAS, the William Hood Dunwoody Industrial Institute, Minneapolis, Minnesota, says, "The educational side of our service seems to be the most important phase of it. We are looking forward to this with growing interest, and feel quite sure that it will be one of the most important services rendered by radio transmitting stations. We believe that the people will tire of the common music. In fact, it is hard to get something new, whereas the educational features contain useful information, and this is what many people desire." WBAA, Purdue University, Lafayette, Indiana, gives most of its time to lectures, engineering, and agriculture, and makes it plain that it has made no attempt to develop entertainment side of broadcasting, but find that there are many listeners who are interested in educational features. Station WHA, University of Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, has a bolder spirit, because it violates what many people consider to be the essential rule of success in any endeavor, namely, give the people what they want. Says WHA, "We are guided not so much by what the public wants as by what the public needs in our broadcasts. The University of Wisconsin believes there is a large field for serving the citizens of Wisconsin and adjacent states by disseminating educational and informational talks by means of the radio telephone. That station transmits no music." Diametrically opposite is the attitude of WOAN, the Vaughn Conservatory of Music, Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, which confines itself almost entirely to music, with only about half an hour a week of jazz. WOAN notes as its most important service, the inculcation of a spirit of cooperation in the communities covered by the concerts. Market and weather reports are to be broadcast as soon as the station can make arrangements to secure them. Still another angle of the educational service of the radio telephone is seen by WCAL, St. Olaf College, Northfield, Minnesota, which prefers to educate by transmitting the classics, rather than placing emphasis on lectures by teachers or other authorities. The most popular program that this station has transmitted was the broadcasting of Shakespeare's As You Like It by a student cast which had previously transmitted the play in the college auditorium. Our reports of athletic contests and scores are eagerly awaited, it seems. Reports indicate that listeners appreciate classical music. Religious services from this station are greatly enjoyed. In response to insistent demands, the Shakespearean play is to be repeated. Other institutions of learning consider that the broadcasting of college games appeals most to the radio audience. KFDJ, the Oregon Agricultural College, Cornwallis, Oregon, ranks college sports as first in popularity, college musical clubs as second, and lectures third. Station WSAJ, Grove City College, Grove City, Pennsylvania, last winter broadcast its championship basketball games play-by-play. And as the team of this college led the league in percentage of games won, its broadcast reports were filled with intense interest for Pennsylvanians. WCAZ, Carthage College, Carthage, Illinois, did exactly the same thing and says, "The basketball games, play-by-play from the gym, with rooting, band, and noise, have brought hundreds of answers from all parts of the country." The University of Colorado, KFAJ, at Boulder, Colorado, places its athletic reports first in popularity, and is almost alone among the stations in mentioning late releases of Edison and Brunswick records as having attracted public commendation. On a different basis is WCN, operated by Clark University, Worcester, Massachusetts, which, while 5 out of its 12 hours a week are given over to jazz, outlines its policy as follows. It has been the intention to develop the Clark station in so far as possible along lines of permanent value. For this reason, we have been particularly interested in such government reports as crop, market, commerce, and weather reports, as far as circumstances would permit, in putting on the air worthwhile things in literature and music, as well as lectures of some educational value. Still another policy, and a new one in broadcasting, is explained by WHAZ, the famous station operated by the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute at Troy, New York, which has been heard in every state in the Union, in the Pacific Ocean, and even in New Zealand. We are trying to give all the social units in this district an opportunity for self-expression, artistically and emotionally through music, intellectually and morally through the medium of lectures, explains WHAZ. There are a number of broadcasting stations operated by newspapers, and on the surface, it would appear that the one person most fitted in all the world to ascertain the wants of the public would be he who publishes a newspaper and operates a broadcasting station. But the newspapers themselves are highly individual in type, and so are the broadcasting stations owned by various dailies all over the country. WGF, the Register and Tribune, Des Moines, Iowa, devotes half of its time to jazz and 40% to classical music. These percentages may reverse themselves, for the program manager says, "We broadcast considerable high-grade music, and the demand for it is increasing. 90% of the programs are personally produced." WGF explains, "We work only Tuesday and Friday evenings, and a church service on Sunday. We operate thus on the theory that it would be impossible to present first-class programs every night, and because persons in the locality of a broadcasting station grow very weary of daily and nightly broadcasting by the same station, which cannot be tuned out to get distant stations." Many stations, we believe, are making a great mistake in an effort to get their money's worth out of their investment in a transmitter. Station WMAQ, operated by the Chicago Daily News and the Fair, located in the Fair Store, Chicago, gives 3/4 of its time to classical music and says, "We have found from our vast correspondence that the general tendency of the public is a demand for the higher class in music and along educational lines. We give one popular program a week on Saturday night, when we generally have a dance orchestra." The Morning Oregonian, operating KGW in Portland, Oregon, is another newspaper that finds that classical music is apparently more popular, but it carefully points to a flaw in its method of drawing its conclusion. The response from concerts of classical music is greater than that from concerts of dance music, but this is because the people who appreciate it are such that will take the trouble to write or telephone. WIAR, the Paducah Evening Sun, Paducah, Kentucky, is not at all critical of the writing ability of any parts of its audience, and reports its surprise at the number of persons who write in about the programs preferring old-time sentimental music to jazz and operatic numbers. The majority of our letters come from persons in the small towns and the country proper. None of these newspapers place any particular emphasis on market reports or news, which some people might consider entirely natural. There are at least 2 stations, however, that make a dissemination of news, and particularly market reports, their main reason for being. Station WMAJ, operated by the Daily Drover's Telegram, Kansas City, Missouri, gives its entire time to market reports. It is on the air for 10 minutes of each hour, from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., giving the latest quotations as received from the markets in Chicago, St. Louis, and Kansas City. That these reports are appreciated are shown by the letters stockmen and farmers send, thanking us for the service, says WMAJ. Another station that devotes most of its attention to markets is WJAG, the Norfolk Daily News, Norfolk, Nebraska. It only gives 1% of its time to music, equally divided between opera and jazz, and the rest of its attention is devoted to current events and market reports. WJAG says of its listeners that they do not listen to educational programs. We receive hundreds of cards telling us that our service is preferred on account of the markets and current events. We are an agricultural community and do not try to compete with the larger stations at night. All our broadcasting is done in the daytime. We are out to serve the farmers and do seem to be giving them what they want. Our station seems to be more of a commercial plant than one of entertaining. The rest of the broadcasting stations do not fall easily into set classifications. About every kind of firm and type of individual has a broadcasting station of one kind or another. That it is quite possible to go from one extreme to another in trying to please the public is indicated by KGO, Altadena Radio Laboratory, Altadena, California, which it describes as follows. When we started broadcasting last July, the local broadcasting was too jazzy and of poor quality, so we put on old-time songs and classical music with Edison records, giving better results than the personal artists. Now, the complaint is that the Class B stations are too highbrow and have turned to us for lighter music. The old jazzy stations have practically all quit. In our opinion, people do not want education, lectures, etc. by radio, and when the other stations are giving lectures, they tune us in for dance. This station now divides its time equally between dance music and classical music, and uses its phonograph practically exclusively. Station WLH of Indianapolis, Indiana, is just going through the process of cutting down the percentage of jazz. It reports, Our listeners are very tired of jazz and mediocre music or programs. We are trying to furnish only the best. Our patrons say they will raise a fund for high-class talent. This is our next move. A station that feels that it has gone through the situation from the start to a satisfactory finish is WRK of Hamilton, Ohio, which now transmits no jazz and divides its time equally between classical music and lectures. The lectures include talks prepared by the Department of Health, but the audience does not like them very well. The only kind of lectures that seem to take are those on radio for city dwellers, Department of Agriculture for rural and farm people. All like the musical programs. Just one station confesses, whether boldly or reluctantly it cannot be said, that it is operated for business purposes. WEAP, Mobile, Alabama, says the station so far has been used principally as a feeder for trade at our store to stimulate sale of sets and parts. One of the surprising facts developed by this questionnaire is the number of transmitters of exceedingly small power, some of them having only 5 watts, others 10, 15, 20, and 50. Because the large stations of 500 watts power have the greatest audience, probably most people think that most stations are that type, but this is far from being the case. Even when to the 500 watt stations are added the 1000 watt plants such as KDKA, WJZ, and WIP, the number of low power stations is sufficient to draw the average down to 200 watts. Also, it has been concluded that the radio audience prefers to listen to personal performances, either in the studio or by remote control, and that the phonograph and the player piano are falling behind in popularity. These conclusions have been drawn not direct from the radio audience, but indirectly from a study of reported programs, on the theory that the broadcasting stations are giving the public what it wants. Reporting baseball series to millions. The Wireless Age, November 1923. He's winding up. Here it comes. He hits it. It's going into center field. He's safe on first. A million loudspeakers from Seattle to Philadelphia, from Ottawa to Mobile, echoed this thrilling description of the World Series and held countless baseball fans in breathless suspense. It was one of those radio events that causes the blood to tingle in the veins with its many tense moments and dashing realism. The broadcasting of the recent World Series will long stand out as one of the greatest heart-bumping events of American sport. It made the game bigger. It made it mean more to hundreds of thousands of sports lovers. The game was not confined to the Polo Grounds or to the Yankee Stadium, but like a great wave, its attending excitement and enthusiasm poured over the country to again blare forth from the husky throats of a million horns. The cheering, the yelling, the usual stream of fan advice to the players, the booing and hat-throwing was not all done by the eye spectators, for at thousands of street corners, public buildings, parks, and theaters, to say nothing of countless homes, the fans held their sway. So rapid was the radio fire that the fans in Washington, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Detroit, Cleveland, Chicago, Kansas City, San Francisco, and other big cities yelled in almost perfect synchronism with those at the Polo Grounds or the Yankee Stadium. What mighty cheers must have gone up, and what a mighty thing radio is to bring about this perfect unison in a country so large as our own. Baseball is a national sport, but this is perhaps the first time that a World Series has been a really successful national event. Heretofore, the newspaper was the first harbinger of victory or defeat. Now, a living voice back of the home plate describing every detail of the action in split-second style is able to reach the ear of every sport lover who cares to listen in. Those who listened in probably never dreamed of the elaborate preparations that were made necessary to handle an event of this magnitude. It was not merely a matter of leasing a Western Union wire that would connect WJZ with its outposts. That is a simple matter, but not so with the negotiations that have to be conducted with the powers that be. So important was this matter that the actual approach for permission to broadcast was made during the middle of last summer. Nor were Messrs. Huggins and McGraw, the respective managers of the Yankees and Giants, the only pebbles on the beach. The final request for permission had to be carried to the high and mighty Judge Landis himself, and since there was no appeal beyond Caesar, those who did the presenting anxiously awaited the fateful answer. The answer was fateful because there was opposition from the direction of the Baseball Sport Writers Association, whose members thought that radio would interfere with the sale of the evening papers that carry the work of their faithful scribes. The gray-haired judge overruled their objection and gave to WJZ and WEAF the right to broadcast. A few days before the opening game of the series, trial communication was established between WJZ and the Yankee Stadium, using the leased wires of the Western Union Company. Major J. Andrew White, who is probably the greatest word picture painter of sporting events today, was the first to employ the new portable amplifier built in the laboratories of the Radio Corporation of America, especially for sporting events. With the aid of J.O. Smith, White's silent partner, the entire thing was rehearsed with care. White used a special diamond which was always held in front of him and manipulated by Smith, who worked with the speed of a one-armed paperhanger in an effort to check up White and to keep him informed. It is generally believed that Smith follows only radio as a hobby. But he is a versatile hobbyist. He not only owns and operates one of the best amateur radio stations in the United States, but has a keen eye for beauty and motorboats as well. And what is more interesting, he is an ardent baseball fan, with the name of every record player on the end of his tongue. This matter of announcing is serious business. Imagine yourself sitting there amidst the roaring crowd of 75,000 people, responsible for an accurate account of every detail to perhaps 2 million people. You can't guess, you've got to be right. Every emergency must be prepared for, every play recorded with the pitiless consistency of a mathematical process. It is 1:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The game is on. White clutches his microphone, all tension, while Smith sits on the edge of his chair, with his little pasteboards ready to be swung into place as the action of the game calls for them. Countless ears await the first word. Witt is up, White calls out. Scott's winding up. He is about to throw. Here it comes. It's a called strike. There is not a moment of silence. Witt is waiting for second pitch. Scott's winding up. He is going to throw. Here it comes. He hits it. It's going over second. Witt safe on first. Smith checks up White instantly and moves his little pasteboard marked Witt over to first base. It is all done in the twinkling of an eye, but the men in the broadcasting box must be on their toes every instant, and they work under a mental strain that is little appreciated by the listener in. As this article is written, White has been responsible for only one error, and that was corrected almost immediately due to Smith's watchful eye. There is every opportunity to make a mistake, however. Imagine, if you will, a hot grounder driven between first and second base. The shortstop and the second baseman are after it, and they almost collide. How easy it would be to pick up the wrong man, and to say that Ward had it instead of Johnson. There were many features of White's broadcasting that brought out the picture of the game so clearly that practically every fan who listened in was a spectator. In one radio sport party, of which the writer was a member, a listener said, "I can see great with White." This was just the situation. White was simply allowing about 2 million baseball radio fans to use his eyes. He painted word pictures that other minds could feast upon. So accurate were his descriptions that anyone who had ever attended a game at the Polo Grounds could visualize the plays perfectly. Very little imagination was required for this, especially when White turned his microphone on the roaring, booing, or cheering crowd. These little inserts of realism transplanted the atmosphere of the diamond to every nook and corner of the United States. At all other times, the external noises were excluded as much as possible, and the special microphone used permitted the speaker to exercise considerable control over this feature. Those who listened to J. Andrew White could not help but admire his painstaking attention to the details, sidelights, and human interest stuff that permitted every listener to be one of the excited fans in the grandstand. Every ball pitched was described as being high or low, inside or out. This made it possible to even anticipate the withdrawal of a pitcher, for every good fan could tell when he was weakening. Such was the case with Shockey in the 8th inning of the 4th game. So it was with Bush, who weakened in the 7th inning of the 5th game. A seasoned fan could see it coming, for Bush had pitched 6 straight balls before he was signaled off the field. When the ball lit in the grandstand, the listeners knew whether it was a male or female who got it, whether they caught it or fumbled it. When the Bambino restlessly kicked up a little dirt while standing on third, the picture came out of the loudspeaker. With all these little humanisms and a little imagination, you were seated comfortably in one of the first-row boxes at the Polo Grounds or Yankee Stadium. A wonderful bit of announcing was also done by McGeehan of WEAF. While White's voice was only modulating the transmitter of WJZ, McGeehan's was used for 4 different equipments: WEAF, WGY, WCAP, and WJAR. It goes without saying that McGeehan was also responsible to an enormous audience. His clear voice, his close attention to detail, and his apparent knowledge of the game kept all of his listeners well informed at every minute. There were many highlights during the series. One of them came between the 3rd and 4th inning of the 4th game, when the voice of the radio reporters suddenly left the air, while the studios broke in and told the audience that a short intermission was necessary because of SOS signals that were on the air. The writer instantly retuned his equipment in time to get the tail end of an SOS call, which was answered by some op who was going too fast for a rank ham to read. However, the World Series was back on the air in a few moments, and the game went serenely on. Those who listened intently could probably hear the incessant clicking of the telegraph instruments in the background. The writer mentions this because it helps to form an amusing reminiscence. What a slow, snail-like thing the telegraph is when compared to the speech-carrying radio wave. Yet what a horribly important thing these clumsy little clickers were 2 or 3 years ago, when the fans in distant cities had to depend on them for the results of the games. The telegraph operators at the series had only sufficient chance to start the first word before those listening on the radio had the complete details of the play. To prove that the radio broadcasting of the World Series was really a tremendous event, national in scope, the writer dispatched 11 wires to some of the principal broadcasting stations in the country, asking what success was being had in this work, and inquiring about the interest and enthusiasm of the fan listeners. In every instance, return wires were received telling of the great success of the series, and of the good that it was doing radio in general. The writer quotes from a typical telegram from WJAR in Providence. Public address system furnished by the American Telephone and Telegraph Company drew a crowd of 3,500 to Garnet side of our store. Cheering eminent during the entire announcements, keeping the crowd well keyed. Enthusiasm running high. Receiving many personal replies from listeners as to fine way in which series is being put over. Another answer from WCAP, Washington, brought more interesting news. William J. Pearson, manager of WCAP, said that practically every radio store in town had loudspeaker parties, and that 2 of the local newspapers were furnishing the loudspeaker to gatherings in connection with electric scoreboard. The Evening Star did a very practical and original thing when a direct radio line was run from the receiving set to a linotype operator, and we have for the first time in history the direct transmission of the World Series from the press box to the linotype operator. This means that a play made in one instant is a few seconds later immortalized in the form of a hot slug, waiting to be gathered up and taken to the press room. Here is an innovation that radio made possible. Just another instance of how we find it wedging itself into our daily existence from practically every angle. What is radio doing for the sport of baseball? Is it making us too lazy to go to the games, or is it injecting new life into it? Fortunately, we have facts and figures that show that radio has brought about a healthy revival of interest in the game. It is to be noted that there were plenty of seats left on the Polo Grounds a few years ago, but since the first series was broadcasted, both the Polo Grounds and the stadium, although the latter has the largest seating capacity of any baseball field in the world, and the former has been greatly enlarged, have been unable to accommodate the crowds that sought their gates. The writer has many friends who had sort of lost interest in it until they heard one of the series reported by radio, which brought back to them the old thrills and the intense desire to see at least one of the games. It goes without saying that there have been a lot of tickets sold on this account, and it looks as though it was up to the radio fans to claim this victory for it. Other highlights were added to the broadcasting of each game when White produced famous sport writers and sport leaders to say a few words to the fans. Grantland Rice, that polished veteran of the sporting page, gave a most interesting talk on the psychology of players. Fred Lieb, president of the American Baseball Writers Association, followed up at the beginning of the second game with some baseball facts that had never before been brought to the attention of the fans. In fact, Lieb was so interested himself in addressing the radio audience that he overstepped his time limit and entirely forgot that the game had started. Other talks by men like Johnny Dundee, Bozeman Bolger, Hugh Fullerton, and Christy Mathewson kept the baseball fever running high among the listeners. There is another highly interesting detail that the writer would like to comment upon before putting the cover on his typewriter. Even the most casual listener was able to hear the players hit the ball, and sometimes the characteristic plunk of the pill could be heard as it embedded itself in the cavity of the catcher's mitt. The sound of the hitting was particularly interesting because the nature of the sound allowed one to tell whether or not it was a good solid strike. When the ball was ticked, the sound in the loudspeaker lacked that fullness that a well-struck ball hit fairly in the center and with full force would give. By thorough attention to this detail, one could often anticipate White's announcements. Again and again, after a good solid crack, he would announce that a two-bagger had been made. When Ruth and Stengel made their home runs, every fan in the country must have known that the ball was on a long, long journey before White had a chance to announce it in his microphone. The writer has but to wish that the wireless age would increase its size by 10 pages, so that he might continue to tell all the interesting things that took place during the broadcasting of the series. They are not important things, but they are interesting. Take, for instance, the odd requests that the announcers at the games receive. Not one of the games passed without 50 or 100 people coming to the announcer and asking him to mention their name for the benefit of friends at home. Some fond father would come forward and ask White or McGeehan to please tell little Johnny, who is listening in with a $2 crystal set, that Daddy is safely at the game. Of course, this would have been an important bit of news for the 2 million odd listeners, to say nothing of the intense aggravation that Johnny would have experienced with Daddy at the game and himself at home with baby sister. Then too, both the announcers had to be careful that theatrical press agents who always swarm such events do not succeed in putting over one of their classy little tricks. They tried again and again, but White's and McGeehan's vigilance successfully prevented them from getting a single event across. In all of the mad scramble for publicity and mention over the radio, not one woman presented herself. Every request was received from a man. What's this about vanity? Probably the real curse of radio is that it will make men more vain. And this is the end of the story of the broadcasting of the World Series by radio. It will be a long-remembered affair in the minds of baseball radio fans, especially in the inaccessible parts of the United States. It brought to them news of the game that might otherwise have taken days to reach them. It is almost useless to rave wildly over the greatness of radio. The thing is so big that words lose their meaning when one attempts to point out its benefits to civilization. But it does go without saying that when White and McGeehan spoke their last word in the last game, every baseball radio fan in the United States voted radio one of the greatest forces in the world today. From 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Radio broadcast, January 1926. If ever the disciples of Mercury crave substantiation of their suspicion that this is a nation 80% moron, they have only to plug in on the air any time between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. Shades of Euterpes, what manner of cacophony greets the ear? You, little boy in the back row. Correct. Now, this department hereby declares it has no quarrel with jazz as such. But what does make it stand up on its hind feet and yowl desolately is the insufferable punkness of present jazz. Popular music always was and always will be, and we contemplate no diatribe against it. In fact, to give it due credit, it should be remembered that the serious music of the present owes considerably more to the popular music of the past times than, say, to the classic polyphony of the church. But the rhythmic caterwauling that is spewed forth by 100 odd, very dance orchestras every night can only by courtesy be called popular music. Popular, no doubt, but music, no. If memory serves us right, we used to have a rather respectable brand of dance music in this country 5 or 10 years ago. The tango brought with it no end of delightful pieces of melodic interest and colorful Spanish trimming. But melody and color have been consigned to the puppies. The only goal of present terpsichorean thrumming seems to be the maintenance of a rhythm, and this 100 banjos do every night, with dogged and monotonous persistence. The result may be satisfactory for dancing, but is far from delectable to the listener in who is not at the moment imitating a kernel corn in a popper. Imagine, if you can, the music lover of a couple hundred years hence, collecting the quaint old foxtrot melodies of the 20th century, as we do the charming old jigs, sarabands, minuets, and polkas. The trouble with modern jazz is not that it is jazz, but that it is poor jazz. Our hi-hat friend who comes out flat-footed with the statement that he cannot bear popular music in any shape or form can, 9 times out of 10, be labeled a four-flusher. Of course, there is that rare 10th person who really understands music, and understanding it realizes that popular music is a very hollow echo of the real thing. But even an epicure occasionally enjoys a fried egg. The line of demarcation between popular and serious music is not as exactly defined as some would have us suspect. At last reports, the savants had not yet voted a unanimous ballot as to which rank claims Mr. Igor Stravinsky. But even as jazz can approach perilously near to being music, so it can likewise move a long way from it. Jazz, as is, has retreated to the limit. The tom-tommery of the aboriginal headhunter must have been less obnoxious than that which delights the present-day chic, if for no other reason than that the savage had fewer instruments and no saxophones with which to perpetrate it. Popular music has been defined as differing from the serious by a diminution of the intellectual content. If the entire intellectual content of the selections that pollute the air from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. were stood on end, it would equal about the intellectual content of the third act of Abbey's Irish Rose. Or, if you must have your statistics stated graphically, it would be slightly higher than the grasshopper's instep. In the aforementioned epic of the American stage, not an event transpires which cannot be anticipated 20 minutes in advance by any normal fourth grader. So in our modern dance music, the unexpected never happens. One piece is the Siamese sister of the other. The tunes are the same, the orchestration is the same, the banality is the same. You, gentle reader, could sit down at the piano now and write something better, and so could the jazz composers. But if the dance music that clutters up the long-suffering ether from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. is about as entertaining as a game of three-handed bridge played with isinglass cards, what can be said of the songs that adorn these sad 4 hours? They are all cut from a pattern, either riotously peppy or lugubriously sad. Of the two, we most abhor the latter. I want somebody, we hear a saccharine baritone imploring from XYZ at a speed of 2.5 miles per hour. And from XYZ, a tearful and flat soprano wails, like a rose, I'm all alone. And we are all but overcome by a wild urge to call up their respective stations and arrange for a get-together. Continuing with our statistics. If all the sickly, sentimental ballads broadcast of an evening were placed end to end, they would reach from Athol, Massachusetts to the Pacific Ocean. That statistical end attained, we would place ourselves at the eastern end of said column and push. But, it is protested, that is what the people want, and what the people want, they should have. With both these propositions, we take exception. In the first place, we are not convinced that such a large number of individuals as is imagined want this juvenile sort of musical substitute. There exist a goodly number of persons who are satisfied with this tasteless diet because they have known no other, but who nevertheless are capable of gustating something at least a little more meaty. Take some ignorant-looking yokel in the lowest ranks of the army of listeners in. Suppose it is discovered that he has assembled his own receiving set. Then, say we, if he has brains enough to know what is inside that mysterious box that brings him in his radio entertainment, he, by that sign, has brains enough to appreciate to some extent the content of music. If he gets a chance. If, for instance, we were to ask him, the song of what small bird, frequently found in clocks, furnishes the motif of Japanese Sandman, Carolina in the Morning, and Berlin's Pack Up Your Sins, we will wager he could discover the answer, and in so doing, he would have, after a fashion, discovered some of their content. But it is to the second proposition, what the people want they should have, we take the most violent exception. Let them, say we, go without it. A cursory glance at this mortal coil discloses it to be populated by two principal classes of beings, the common people and those existing to serve the common people. Pity the poor masses, we hear constantly reiterated. Pity rather the poor classes, we shout. They are the ones who are getting the rotten deal in this age of the proletariat. Everywhere the lowbrow turns, he finds someone waiting to serve and entertain him, to supply at a moment's notice his slightest want. While the poor highbrow searches about, taking his scant pleasures where he may. What's more, the highbrow's entertainment comes high, unless it be communion with books. And more often than not, he has less money than his slanty-domed, ditch-excavating neighbor. With half the world catering to the masses' whims, we often wonder why existence does not become a surfeit and a bore to said masses. If Fuzzy Wuzzy Baby played on a tomato can is the summum bonum in music to them, then imagine how constantly they are surrounded by art. Imagine a world in which every open cafe door emitted strains of Brahms and Debussy, and passers-by whistled airs by Palestrina. Are they whistleable? A world in which every billboard bristled with El Grecos and Titians, and every vaudeville skit displayed the artistry of a Strindberg or a Synge. Well, now that we've quite completely disposed of the issue, whether the public should get what it supposedly wants, let's get back to the subject, which, if we remember, was jazz. A little jazz is relished by the best of men, now and then, but there's no relish in the variety on the present market. Even the redoubtable Paul Whiteman is dishing out the same monotonous stuff as the rest of them, the while riding on a reputation created by mob hysteria, and which he has long ceased to deserve. In conclusion, give us jazz, O Mr. Popular Music Composer. We can stand our share of punishment, but for heaven's sake, give us a better brand of it. We will trade 17 yes sir that's my babies for one Allah's holiday, or what have you. What Radio Means to Me by W. Francis Goodrow. Radio broadcast, January 1924. And the night shall be filled with music, and the cares that infest the day shall fold their tents like the Arabs, and as silently steal away. Longfellow. Somehow, whenever I think of radio, I also think of these lines by Longfellow. They express so well something of what radio means to me. After having spent almost 3 years in a hospital, I know what a boon radio has proved to me and others in hospitals. I entered the hospital in November 1920. At that time, radio was very little used for entertainment purposes. To take up my time and pass the weary hours away, I tried many things, such as basket making and reading, but nothing seemed to satisfy me for any length of time. Something else was needed to make my stay in the hospital more pleasant, something that would grow more interesting day by day. I was wondering what to do next when I was told that we were to have a radio concert. As I had never heard music by radio, I was naturally impatient for the concert to start. It was given through the kindness of Troop 5, Providence Boy Scouts. They used a set with a 2-stage audio amplifier and loudspeaker. The concert was given in a large ward, but the music could be heard plainly in every corner. The concert lasted only about 1 hour, but I received more enjoyment in this 1 hour than I had ever had in any 1 hour in the hospital. Thus, I received my introduction to radio. From that day, I have been, and always will be, a radio bug. I decided I would have a radio set, but was a little puzzled how to get one. I had almost decided to purchase an outfit when I was told by a friend that it was easy to make a simple crystal receiver. That suggestion appealed to me, for I could while away much of my time in making it. By making my own, I would be sure to get a better idea of radio, and would perhaps enjoy a simple receiver that I had built myself more than one I might purchase. I secured several books on radio, from which I got at least a faint idea of radio sets and how to build them. I decided that a 2-slide tuner was what I wanted. I secured the material and built one. Strange to say, it worked, and I must confess that my first radio set gave me more pleasure than all the radio sets I have had since. I used this set for some time, and then decided that I had outgrown it. I had heard that a 2-circuit tuner would give better results, so I built one. It worked splendidly, so I commenced to study radio in earnest. I studied radio books on an average of 5 hours a day. At last I had found what I had been seeking, that something which should pass time away and give greater pleasure the longer I worked with it. In the daytime, I studied my books and worked on my radio set. At night, I listened to music until I became tired and went to sleep. I had been using this radio set, the 2-circuit one, for about 2 months when I thought I could undertake a tube set. I purchased several new parts and built a 3-circuit regenerative set using a WD-11 tube given me by a friend. I was somewhat disappointed with this set, because, like many other beginners with a tube set, I expected too much of it at first. I expected to hear stations 1,000 miles away the first night, but I didn't. In fact, for the first week, I heard nothing that I could not hear on my crystal set. However, as time went on, I became more expert. Soon, I found no trouble in reaching every evening those stations that I had long wanted to hear. To share my pleasure with the others in the hospital, I found I would need a 2-stage amplifier and some kind of a loudspeaker. Well, the 2-stage was soon secured, and a friend kindly loaned his loudspeaker. Permission was obtained for us to give a concert one Sunday evening in a ward. As there was a good program scheduled, we made our initial bow under favorable conditions. This concert consisted of selections by 100 harps, vocal selections, etc. The patients told me that they enjoyed it a lot. Some of them decided that they would like to have radio sets, and asked me if I would help them make them. I did, and soon there were 12 sets in our ward. No one but those who have had the experience can ever know how much enjoyment radio is giving to those who are shut in. To the person shut in, radio means more than just a new means of hearing music. Although the music we hear is excellent, the greatest benefit we derive from radio is the feeling of intimate touch with the world. We cannot go to the theater nor the ball game, but thanks to radio, they can and do come to us. A turn of the wrist and we have our choice of entertainment for the evening. Truly, radio means much to me. Those in charge of our hospitals are coming to realize how much radio can help them in their great work, and as fast as they can, they are installing radio for the benefit of those in their care. Unfortunately, many hospitals have not the funds to install radio. However, I am sure when it is realized just how much radio means and how much good it can do, the funds will be found somehow. Radio began to interest me 18 months ago, and today I realize it has filled a place in my life that nothing else could ever do. Radio announcers. Radio Digest, September, October, and November 1927. Graham McNamee, whose voice has been heard by more people than any man living, is shown in action in 2 customary poses. Mac, as his cronies call him, is right up front when there's a Lindbergh reception, a president or crown prince speaking, or a passional fist fight. He's always up and at them, live and virile. So much so that a restraint on his enthusiasm has been invented. If you will look close at the large photograph, you will see sort of a muzzle in the form of a wire loop. This is to keep Graham from getting at you when something exciting happens and he wants to shout to millions what he has seen. In addition to hearing him regularly over the WEAF chain, his followers will catch him on the Tunney-Dempsey fracas in Chicago when he gives a first-hand blow-to-blow description of that great battle. When the last story has been told of all the great fights that have been broadcast from the arena, the name of J. Andrew White will stand as the dean and peer of them all. He was the first ever to carry a microphone to a ringside when he broadcast the Dempsey-Carpentier fight 6 years ago. He has been trailing around with the microphone at all the big fights ever since. As vice president and general manager of the Columbia Broadcasting System, he is now engaged in presenting grand opera stars and famous artistic productions to radio audiences. Major White, in fact, has long been celebrated as a dilettante, and in every sport finds a species of art, which he quickly winnows and flashes with nimble wit to the waiting listener. 4 years he has served as Master of Ceremonies at the Radio Industries Banquet in the Hotel Astor, New York, the premier social event of the year in radio. His polish and poise make him a favorite after-dinner speaker. These two eyes under that heavy brow are the two eyes that see the outstanding Eastern football games this season for millions of radio listeners in various parts of the country. They are the eyes of Phillips Carlin, manager and announcer extraordinary for the mother station of the National Broadcasting Company's Red Network, WEAF, New York. Carlin is a born orator. He has the gift of language and the gift of expression. That with which nature endowed him has been polished and developed through training and a course at New York University. He finds this faculty greatly to his advantage in running a first-class New York broadcasting station. There was a time not so very long ago when Phillips Carlin did not exactly know just how he was going to use this unusual propensity in the way of a career. The World War came along and he joined the Navy. He left the service a junior lieutenant. Finally, he found his opportunity at WEAF. He has made rapid progress since his affiliation with that station. His hours at the studio are from 10 to 10, time off for lunch if he can get it. He personally supervises most of the detail in arranging programs and rehearsals. He even looks after getting the right sort of properties for noise effects. When he gets a chance to announce football games, he considers it a lark. Meet the radio voices from Kansas City. Radio broadcast, November 1924. A bitter war is on in the ranks of radio listeners of the heart of America city, Kansas City. Unconsciously and yet not unwillingly, whole groups of these radio partisans have fallen into clans. And in many homes, radio dealers say, arguments have grown so heated that it has been necessary to install a receiving set for each radio fan in the household, as a final effort to lure the dove of peace back to a permanent roost on the domestic antenna. For it develops that the listeners in of Kansas City, in common with those of many other cities, have their favorite ether performers just as decidedly as theater-goers have their stage favorites. And when WHB and WMAJ are on the air at the same time, and Sally craves to listen to the Sweeney Orchestra, Bill is out of luck for that lecture on wave traps over WMAJ. So Bill has his receiving set, be it ever so humble, and Sally has hers, and there is peace in the domicile of the listeners, and, I think, a smile on the face of the radio dealer. Outstanding among the radio favorites of Kansas Cityans are the Kansas City Stars Nighthawks. The regular Nighthawk entertainers, known from coast to coast and gulf to lakes, are the Coon Sanders Orchestra and Leo Fitzpatrick, radio editor of the Star and merry old chief in charge of the midnight frolics of the Nighthawks in the grill of a downtown hotel. The merry old chief also appears before the microphone in the Star's studio as RADO in regular weekly minstrel programs. The Nighthawk programs were among the first attempts at midnight broadcasting on a regular schedule 6 nights a week, and have been running full blast every night except Sunday for nearly 2 years. Listeners picking up the Nighthawk frolic and writing or otherwise communicating with the WDAF station are enrolled on the membership roster of the Nighthawk organization and awarded membership cards. The roster includes thousands of names. Ranking second in popularity with Kansas City listeners in the ranks of the WDAF entertainers is the Radio Trio, composed of Carson Robinson, Stephen Cady, and Harry Kessel. Mr. Robinson is a pianist and whistler, if not of note, at least of great popularity, and has written several blues song hits, and chimes in with his effective baritone when the trio is singing ensemble. Mr. Cady has an excellent tenor voice, and Mr. Kessel is the trio's lead and usual soloist. Assisted by R.A. Dio, the trio gives a popular program weekly over WDAF, which, judging from the hundreds of letters pouring into the office of the Star's radio editors, indicate nationwide approval. The station of the Sweeney Automotive and Electrical School, WHB, claims to be the first broadcaster west of the Mississippi River to employ a regular orchestra. George C. Parrish, known among music critics of the Southwest as one of the most able and versatile pianists in Kansas City, is director of the orchestra. The popularity of Mr. Parrish's orchestra is proved by the great quantity of enthusiastic letters that are received by the Sweeney station weekly from all sections of the Western Hemisphere. The Sweeney Orchestra is probably one of the most popular dance combinations with Kansas City listeners in. Faraway owners of Nutridyne and Super Heterodyne sets nightly notify the Sweeney station that they are concentrating on bringing in WHB Strong to provide music for dancing. And then Mr. Parrish and John T. Schilling, the WHB announcers, get their heads together and release some of the steppenest music that travels through the ether from what the local boosters call the Heart of America City. Miss Nell O'Brien and Mrs. Elizabeth Ranson Hinton, sopranos, are popular radio stars appearing exclusively before the microphone of WHB. Both have exceptional voices, and nights when they are on the programs are certain to be busy ones for the telephone operators at the Sweeney switchboard, for it's "Please have Miss O'Brien sing this," and "Please have Mrs. Hinton sing that." And so it goes with the radio listeners of Kansas City and the surrounding territory. They have their radio favorites, and they keep the telephone wires warm, telling the two large broadcasting station operators just what they desire to hear. Radio brings football to all the people. The Wireless Age, December 1922. There has been just one big movement visible in collegiate football during the past few years. That has been the great and growing interest of the general public in the sport. It was not so many years ago that only college students and old grads were at all concerned in the gridiron struggles, some of which went down as glorious victories and defeats in college history. Now all that is changed. The big college games fill the sporting pages with columns of scientific analysis of the opposing teams. Front-page stories are printed describing an important contest, such as Yale-Harvard and Princeton-Chicago. Thousands of men and women who never went through college, unless in one door and out the other, pay big premiums for the privilege of sitting in bleak stands under a cold November drizzle and watching a collegiate football classic. Football has changed from a college sport to a national one, and it is expected that in the near future, the All-American football team, instead of being picked by sporting editors from comparisons of records, will be actually selected on the gridiron by a few games, comparable to the World Series in baseball. What share is radio having in this great and important change that is coming over football? A big part, of course. All who owned receiving sets this fall had the privilege of listening to nearly a score of broadcast football games. Games broadcast directly from the field, with the yells and songs of the cheering sections plainly audible, as well as the voice of some sporting writer describing each play. "Hold 'em, hold 'em, hold 'em, hold 'em, hold 'em." And through the din came the calm voice of the expert. "Chicago's ball on her own 10-yard line. 3rd down, 8 yards to go. A forward pass is blocked by Princeton, which gets the ball on a fumble." And in that particular game, the excitement was as intense in thousands of homes as it was at the field in Chicago, as Princeton, apparently defeated, though within a couple of yards of a winning touchdown that she apparently could not make, hit the Chicago line hard. "Is the ball over the line? Is the ball over the line?" panted the voice of the announcer. "We can't tell from here. No one can tell, for it is buried far under a mass of piled-up humanity. The referees are digging their way to the bottom. If the ball is over the line, Princeton has won. Is it over? Listen to them yell. Yes, it's over. It's over. Princeton has won. A touchdown has been made. Princeton has won the greatest football struggle I have ever seen, and that's that." Who could help succumbing to such contagious enthusiasm, to such evident suspense? Today, the football fields of a score of colleges have been much enlarged in order to accommodate the vast public. The stadium at Harvard seats 53,000. The Yale Bowl at New Haven and Franklin Field in Philadelphia, the Polo Grounds in New York, fields in Chicago, St. Louis, and San Francisco have all been given the increased facilities demanded by the public. But radio gives the public the greatest football field of all, the home. Every game of major importance was put on the air this fall, in some case by 2 different stations at once. This was the case with the Princeton-Chicago battle, which was broadcast by KYW, the Westinghouse station in Chicago, and at the same time by WEAF, the American Telephone and Telegraph station in New York City. The Princeton-Harvard battle, in which Princeton won for the 4th time in 30 years, was also broadcast by 2 stations. One, the AMRAD transmitter WGI, and the other WEAF. WJZ, the Radio Corporation of America Westinghouse station at Newark, New Jersey, ran a regular schedule every Saturday during the fall, reporting the games as played at the Polo Grounds in New York City. KDKA at Pittsburgh reported its local games. So it went throughout the country. In all, over 24 different games must have been broadcast, some of them by 2 transmitters at once. In at least 2 instances, the radio equipment of college laboratories was turned to broadcasting football reports. Union College, which operates WRL, put a number of play-by-play reports on the air each Saturday, and Yale College at New Haven, Connecticut, did likewise. The work of the artist and interior decorator, as well as the labors of the radio engineer, are evident in 1927 to 28 radio receivers. This Splitdorf Abbey set, designed by Noel S. Dunbar after an old world jewel case, is a 6-tube receiver priced at $100. Freshman G4. Here is a new electrically operated Freshman receiver, complete and ready to operate as delivered. The price is $225, which includes new RCA AC tubes. The Stewart Warner 520. The tendency towards single control is again manifest in this 6-tube receiver. 2 tuned and 1 untuned stages of RF detector and 2 transformer-coupled audio stages comprise the circuit. The cabinet is of dull polished walnut veneer. The price, $125. Bosch 66. Another single control receiver employing 6 tubes, this one being priced under $100. The beauty of the cabinet is a feature, but the efficiency of the circuit itself has in no way been neglected. The illuminated dial is graduated into both kilocycles and arbitrary numbers. Greeb's Synchrophase 7. The 5 tuned stages, 4 RF and detector, are tuned by means of a single dial and vernier, the rigidity of the tuning condenser assembly ensuring permanency of the accurate factory adjustment. The receiver has been carefully shielded, while the special coils employed enhance the selectivity and permit maximum amplification. These coils are of the binocular type and are wound with Litz wire. The Kellogg 507. This is a 6-tube, non-oscillating TRF set, balanced and shielded. Inductance tuning is employed, a system which requires no variable condensers, and which permits equal amplification throughout the frequency spectrum covered. The price of the receiver is $190. Commander. Here is a King 6-tube, completely shielded TRF receiver, which makes use of single control tuning. There are 3 RF stages. The loop may be folded into the cabinet. Price, $220. Workrite. This 8-tube receiver has all-metal chassis and complete copper shielding. There is a single illuminated drum-type dial control. Price, $160 without table. The Colster 6H consists of a 6-tube receiver power cone reproducer and B-socket power unit. Space is provided for either an A-socket power device or a storage battery, which is extra. Price, $265. The Warwick. In a cabinet of Tudor period, a 6-tube Splitdorf receiver is built in. Price, $275 with cone and power supply unit. Zenith. The Model 17E Electric. A single-tube 400 mA unit supplies the necessary power. The receiver itself employs 6 tubes. The price is $350. Spin-it base, $20 extra. The Navajo. 6 tubes, shielded, single control. These words describe this new Mohawk receiver just as they do other prominent receivers of the season, for this circuit combination predominates in 1928 models. The Navajo sells for $67.50. Equipment to adapt it for AC operation is obtainable at additional cost. Murad. 2 TRF stages, detector, and 3 audio stages are included in this receiver. The audio stages, all of the double impedance form, give uniform response between 30 and 5,000 cycles, according to the manufacturers. Single control tuning is featured. Price, $98. In a console equipped for complete AC operation, the receiver sells for $265. The Bandbox. This is a recent presentation of the Crosley Corporation. It is a 6-tube Neutrodyne made in 2 models, for battery or lamp socket operation, is shielded, and has 1 dial tuning. The prices are $55 and $65 for battery and AC operation respectively. For the Bandbox. This console has been specially designed for the Crosley Bandbox. The bandbox, the chassis of which is completely shielded, may quickly be removed from its metal cabinets and inserted into the more pretentious console. A loop Nutradyne. It is a Fried-Eismann 8-tube single-control receiver, retailing for $395 with a cone loudspeaker as illustrated. The radio phonograph. This Stromberg-Carlson masterpiece consists of a complete AC-operated 7-tube single-tuning control receiver combined with a modern electric phonograph. A concealed loop obviates the use of outdoor antenna. Price is $1,245 completely equipped with cone loudspeaker. FADA. 3 RF stages, 2 tuning controls, 1-piece steel chassis, and equalized amplification are features of the FADA Special, retailing at $95. The FADA 7. It is optional whether loop or antenna is used with this receiver, which has 4 stages of RF. An improvement in the detector circuit reduces the possibilities of overloading. This 7-tube receiver sells for $185. Amrad's The Windsor. This artistic cabinet houses a very efficient 7-tube Nutradyne chassis. Tuning is accomplished by a single dial, and a further adjustment is provided for volume control. Either an antenna or loop may be used, and all parts are copper shielded. A tone filter is incorporated. The price is $195. A Marti receiver. Another electric receiver, this one employing 6 tubes, 3 of which constitute the audio channel, resistance couplings being featured. Tuning is accomplished by means of 2 dials. The Mayflower. Here is a 5-tube, completely AC-operated receiver by Cleartone of Cincinnati. Complete with AC tubes, loudspeaker, and built-in power unit, the Mayflower lists at $250. The well-known Lofton White circuit, 6 tubes, is employed in the Arborphone Model 253 receiver. Tuning is accomplished by means of a single dial calibrated in wavelengths. A peerless cone loudspeaker is included, and the receiver may be used with either batteries or socket-powered devices. The cabinet is of matched walnut, curly maple, and rosewood veneers, and gumwood. Price $250. A new departure and power supply. The Dayfan Electric Company of Dayton, Ohio, has placed on the market receivers which are powered by motor generators, all batteries being eliminated. The efficiency of the motor generator principle of transforming alternating current to direct current has long been recognized, but its application to the powering of a radio receiver has hitherto been neglected, so far as receivers commercially available are concerned. An economical AC receiver. The manufacturers of this receiver, the Argus Radio Corporation of New York City, state that the cost of operating this receiver is no more than 1/5 of a cent per hour. The receiver is completely AC operated and employs no batteries or chargers. There are 6 tubes in all, 3 of which are RF in a combination of tuned and untuned stages. The final audio stage employs a 210 type tube, a plate potential of 400 volts being applied to it. Provision is made so that the audio amplifier may be used in conjunction with a phonograph pickup device. Price $195, less tubes and loudspeaker. A departure in loudspeakers. The Rolla Model 20 combines a baffleboard loudspeaker of remarkable efficiency with floor screen measuring 3 feet high by 2 feet wide. The price is $85. An Acme offering. This novel loudspeaker makes use of a double cone arrangement, good amplification of the low notes being possible on account of the free edge cones. The manufacturers state that an output device is not necessary with this loudspeaker. Price $25. The AK cone. The new Atwater Kent Model E employs a novel method of cone suspension, permitting satisfactory response to minute vibrations. Price $30. The Crosley Music Cone. A baffleboard effect is obtained by the use of the tiltable surface. Price $27.50. Trim Concerto. A $10 cone, 14 inches in diameter. The 17-inch cone retails for $16. Operadio. The junior model has a 30-inch exponential air column, while the senior has one of 54 inches. The prices are $15 and $25. The Bosch Library Ambitone. Fada Pedestal. This is a 22-inch free-floating cone of attractive Grecian design. The overall height is 55 inches. Price $50. A new Magnavox. Loudspeaker and B-supply in one unit, AC operated. A 210 type power tube should be used. The loudspeaker is of the dynamic type. Price for the unit $110. The Castle. A two-tone bronze relief pattern enhances the appearance of this tower 17-inch cone. Price $9.50. In Gothic design. A beautiful and well-proportioned free-edge periphery cone. The reproduction from the Peerless is in keeping with its appearance. Price $35. This is a Fried Eismann electrically operated receiver, listing at $295. A Nutridyne circuit is used, and extraordinary selectivity is claimed by the manufacturers. An All-American Highboy. The receiver employs 6 tubes, and may be obtained either to use the new AC tubes or for ordinary tubes. Batteries or power units being required in the latter case. Spartan Model 62. Everything, with the exception of the loudspeaker, is self-contained in this new electric receiver by Sparks Withington. No batteries are required. The price, $188. Buckingham. Here is a receiver which may be used with either batteries or power units. It employs 6 tubes, 3 of which are RF stages. The single dial control system employed is a special Buckingham patent. The dial is illuminated and calibrated in both kilocycles and degrees. The case console. An enclosed loop, controlled from the front panel, obviates the necessity for an outdoor antenna. The receiver employs 9 tubes, and tuning is accomplished by means of a single dial. It is equipped with a Newcomb Holly loudspeaker, which has an air column of 72 inches. LK Senior. Complete AC operation with every necessary piece of equipment built in, unified tuning control, true phonic audio amplification, total copper shielding, 6 tubes. Thus can this new LK receiver be described. The list price is $195. 6 McCullough AC tubes and 1 Raytheon BH rectifier are required as extras. The new Radiola 17. A receiver which makes use of the new AC tubes in the first 5 stages, and a 171 type tube in the final second audio stage. The receiver may therefore be supplied with A power from the house lighting circuit without the use of additional equipment. B and C batteries are also eliminated by the use of a suitable power device which is built in. Price $130. A new cone. The new 100A cone loudspeaker priced at $35. A custom-built radio receiver. The Radiola 32 combines the well-known RCA 8-tube superheterodyne and a baffleboard loudspeaker in a single cabinet. Since a loop, directionally variable, is built in this receiver, it may be used where facilities for outdoor antenna erection are not available, although binding posts are provided for antenna and ground if such are used. All current is obtained by plugging into the house lighting supply. The model is obtainable for either AC or DC operation. Price $895 complete. 6 tubes and single control. The new $69.50 Radiola 16. This receiver, like the 17, also employs 3 RF stages, detector, and 2 transformer-coupled audio stages, but the tubes are not of the AC type. The output audio tube is of the 112 type, as opposed to the 171 in the Radiola 17. Tuning is accomplished by means of a single control knob, but there are also a volume control knob and a filament switch. The Radiola 20. This is not a new season's model, but it has been carried over on account of its popularity. It is a 5-tube TRF receiver with neural dial tuning. Its price is $78, and it may readily be adapted for AC operation. Radiola 30A. The circuit employed in this new receiver is identically the same as that of the Radiola 36, i.e. an 8-tube superheterodyne, and it is operated from the light socket. The 30A retails for considerably less than the 32, however, its list price being $495 complete. The differentiating features of the less expensive model are: 1. The 100A cone is employed instead of the more powerful and more expensive baffleboard loudspeaker. And 2. No loop is supplied. Antenna and ground connections are provided, and for average reception, an ordinary indoor antenna will be satisfactory. A power cone reproducer. In addition to the cone loudspeaker, this Colster power assembly comprises a B power device to furnish the necessary voltages to operate any commercial receiver. It is operated from the 60-cycle 110-volt AC power supply. The price is $150 without tubes. 2 rectifier tubes, CX316B or UX216B, a regulator tube, and a power tube, CX310 or UX210, are necessary. Valleytone Model 52. A 5-tube receiver to suit the average pocket, its list price being $85, less accessories. Tuning is accomplished by means of 2 dials. A simple switching arrangement built into the set makes the use of a power tube optional. The Spinet, a 7-tube balanced receiver by Cullen B. Kennedy Incorporated. There are 4 RF stages, but just 1 tuning control. The finish is of 2-tone antique mahogany, and there is ample storage space for power accessories. Price $195. For the set constructor. Keeping apace with the commercial set manufacturer, the home constructor nowadays builds his receiver into a luxurious piece of furniture. This beautiful walnut cabinet has a sliding frame for a radio panel not larger than 8 3/8 inches by 21 inches, and 14 inches deep behind panel. The list price varies from $80 for the straight cabinet to $105 to include a peerless cone. It is a product of the Radio Master Corporation, Bay City, Michigan. The Minstrel. A successful antenna-operated receiver is this 7-tube single-control Apex set. The circuit employed is of the Technodyne variety, one that has become increasingly popular lately, and which makes use of a new form of neutralization. Less accessories, the Minstrel lists for $225. This is the Fonsteel Model 30 6-tube receiver. Its chassis is carefully shielded and equipped with flexible cable connections. Price $105. The Baby Grand by Audiola, Chicago, comes with either an 8-tube or 6-tube chassis, the former listing at $275 and the latter at $225. There are 2 knobs on each model, one for tuning and the second for volume control. Individual stage shielding adds to the general efficiency of the set. A special long air column loudspeaker is built in. Designed for a radio set. Here is another example of the cabinet maker's efforts to produce a radio cabinet which is in every respect equally as beautiful as the furniture surrounding it. The finish of this particular cabinet is in walnut and maple, and it is equipped with a Ferrand cone loudspeaker. It is designed to accommodate all standard makes of radio receivers, and is a product of the Musical Products Distributing Company, New York City. Price $95. An elliptical cone. The frame and base of this new Splitdorf cone is of rich antique walnut finish, deeply carved, the result being a loudspeaker which will enhance almost any setting. The elliptical shape of the cone makes possible deep, richly resonant tones, the short diameter of the ellipse favoring the high tones, and the long diameter sustaining the deep tones. A combination of design features enables the loudspeaker to handle great power. The list price is $35. 3 loudspeakers in disguise. The group of books in the first place is nothing less than a loudspeaker in concealment. A 40-inch serpentine tone chamber winds behind the embossed leather book bindings. This choral cabinet lists at $50, or $75 if the equestrienne bronzes are included. The lamp, too, in addition to serving its obvious purpose, hides an air column loudspeaker. Depending upon the finish, it lists at $35, $50, or $60. The carved picture frame to the left also conceals a loudspeaker, the tone chamber of which is a 30-inch serpentine winding. The hand-carved black walnut model lists at $35, but other models are less expensive, even as low as $20. Manufactured by Frank R. Porter, Washington, District of Columbia. Grebe 2020. The numerals denoting this model refer to the cone diameter and the fact that it is constructed at an angle of 20 degrees. Price $35. Algonquin. A full floating cone of a moisture-proof impregnated fabric. The Algonquin Electric Company retails this cone at $15. Baldwin. A special unit is responsible for the good tone of the Baldwin 99. This instrument sells for $28.50. Another Rolla art model. A large and effective baffle surface is responsible for excellent tone quality. Rolla manufactures less expensive models, from $28.50 up. The one illustrated is priced at $45. Utah. This $30 instrument is of 5-ply natural finished walnut. An innovation. An up-to-date post-war map of the world surrounds the Symphonic Globe loudspeaker, a $35 product of the Symphonic Sales Corporation. A 22-inch cone. The new Spartan loudspeaker, a product of the Sparks Withington Company, retails at $30. In disguise. A cone loudspeaker in tip-table form. The Teletone Model 70. Price $40. The Mohawk Pyromonic. The pyramidal construction in the diaphragm is responsible for very excellent quality from this $25 instrument. The Adventurer. Another bas-relief pattern of the Tower Manufacturing Corporation. The ship is suitably and vividly colored. The price, $9.50. Another pedestal. The Baldwin loudspeaker illustrated elsewhere on this page is also obtainable in the attractive form shown here. Price, $39.50. The Dempsey-Tunney Fight. Radio broadcast. December 1926. And speaking of sports, perhaps we may be permitted at this, our first opportunity, to comment on the broadcasting of the Dempsey-Tunney fight. This broadcast may be reckoned as an outstanding event in radio's young history, and that it was heard by countless thousands more of people than ever listened to a sports event before. Some 30-odd stations were involved in the hookup. It is our guess that for those 45 minutes, there was listening in the largest audience ever attracted by a single broadcast, which, if you like superlatives, means the largest audience in the history of the world. What we want to get off our chest first is some unstinted praise for J. Andrew White, who reported the fracas. His was as perfect a piece of work as we have ever heard over the radio, and we hope that every aspiring sports reporter in the country heard it to take a lesson from it. Even the Major's informal remarks before the bout started were effective. For instance, when he laughingly complained that Graham McNamee, his assistant, was using his back as a table to write on, he conveyed a perfect picture of the crowded conditions at the ringside. And from the sounding of the first gong, his delineation of the progress of the fight was an almost incredible feat of rapid, intelligible reporting. Never a pause, nor a search for words, nor a garbled-up sentence. To be sure, we writhed every time he said "idea" or "jar," but what was that beside the fact that he employed no more than 3 ers in the whole 30 minutes? In contrast to Major White's fine job was the miserable exhibition made by McNamee, whose duty it was to handle the mic during the 1-minute rest periods between the rounds. Never has this star announcer been more off form. He hemmed and hawed and blustered about and got utterly nothing said. This quoted verbatim. "It's still raining. It certainly is raining. Yes, it's still raining. Back to the sticks." No sentence he started ever came out right side up, and he included such choice breaks as, "Ladies and gentlemen of the radio audience and others who may be present," and referred to Dempsey's returning to his wife and family. The commercial side of the feature was well handled. As you know, the cost of the broadcast was borne by the Royal Typewriter Company, at a rumored figure of $35,000. The trade name of the machine was worked in a goodly number of times, but probably not too often at that when you consider it was costing about $1,000 per mention. And surprising and commendable exhibition of restraint, it was never once mentioned during the 45 minutes of the fight. Dad Neptune sings at WPG. Marine Studio lives up to its name with sea atmosphere. By Ethel Rattay Fowler. Radio Digest, October 1928. Marine Studio means marine, and the Marine Studio of WPG, Atlantic City, New Jersey, means that the sweltering citizen of the hot interior of our fair land who tunes in this studio will get a whiff of the sea. He will hear the roll of the waves, the shouts of the bathers, songs of the blue deep, and his nostrils will all but tingle with the smell of the salt. When the sponsors of this individualistic station decided to have a marine studio, they employed a marine architect and a ship's interior decorator, if there is any such animule. You find the studio embroidered with portholes, a ship's wheel in the pilot house, ropes, life preservers, and boats to make the illusion complete. Father Neptune himself opens up the day's broadcasting in the WPG Marine Studio. It's an invitation or a challenge, according to his mood. Chief announcer Norman Reed assists at the ceremonies by heaving the microphone down the scuttle hatch of the control room to the old gent's immediate domain. There he whispers or he roars, and sometimes he purrs or he grumbles. And Uncle Cy Hoskins, 4 miles up the road from Raspberry Corners in Grass County, can hoist his boots on the old cane-bottom chair and tune in all the cursory comment Father Neptune may be uttering at the moment. You can't fail to feel the briny atmosphere after such a greeting. Then perchance we have the thrill of a big splash, and Mr. Reed tells us that one of the Hawaiian high divers has just shoved off from an 80-foot perch and disappeared beneath the wave. What ho! He's up again, blowing and snorting and ready for another tailspin into the sea. And the program continues with suggestions throughout of the rolling waves and the people who master them. Sea Memories is an interesting feature. The Musical Maids, an instrumental trio, bring suggestions of white sand and mermaids. Josh Kitching with his banjo brings visions of the sunny Southland. Sometimes he makes up for an old darky, and that is when those who come to peek through the portholes enjoy him most. Citizens of the interior find WPG a great boon during the hot spells because of the ocean atmosphere that prevails, and the management never fails to provide a program with this particular characteristic. The Ipana Troubadours. Radio broadcast, September 1926. As we have before stated in this department, it is our belief that the best that radio has to offer is to be found in the regular weekly programs of the various indirect advertisers. Among such programs, we think those of the Ipana Troubadours demand a high rating. The impression gained while listening to them is, here is a program that is prepared and not merely happening. Studio programs too frequently convey to us the impression that we are listening in on a rehearsal. The Troubadours play with a spirit and a precision which, if we are any judge, indicates careful and frequent rehearsal. When the manufacturers sponsoring this program decided to go on the air, they sought one Sam Lannon to direct their radio entertainment. Lannon had had 6 years as a leader of a popular Broadway dance orchestra, and a great deal of experience as a recording artist. He agreed to undertake the organization and leadership of the Ipana Troubadours, providing he was permitted to get his own artists, and to pick them from the country's best dance and symphony orchestras. That he did get the artists he wanted is now known to many thousands of radio listeners throughout the country. Lucian Schmidt, for example, virtuoso cellist, was Walter Damrosch's first cellist for 5 seasons, and he is also an accomplished pianist and saxophone player. Schmidt is representative of the group. The Ipana Troubadours broadcast their first program on April 8, 1925, from stations WEAF and WOO. They continued on these 2 stations until September 16th, when they extended their broadcasting to 6 other stations. Since then, from time to time, other stations have been added until now these artists may be heard each Wednesday from the following chain stations: WEAF, WEEI, WGR, WOO, WCAP, WWJ, WLIB, WSAI, WOC, KSD, and WCCO. That the Ipana Troubadours are popular, there is no doubt. It is reported that from April 8, 1925 to December 31, 1925, most of the time using only 2 stations, They received more than 30,000 letters and cards of praise, suggestions, requests for special numbers, and so on. After March of this year, the Correspondence Department of WEAF, which has jurisdiction over the analysis of the thousands of letters received from WEAF's fans, concluded its study of the mail received during that month and gave highest honors to the Ipana Troubadours. The Vikings and Blanche Elizabeth Wade, the G.R. Kinney Company storyteller, practically ran neck and neck for second place, but were more than 1,000 letters below the total reached by the Ipana Troubadours. Other regular WEAF features which stood high in the list for the month were, respectively, the Gold Dust Twins, the Atwater Kent Radio Hour, Shinola Merrymakers, Silvertown Chord Orchestra, the Clico Eskimos, and the Eveready Hour in the order named. Is Child Prodigy. Radio Digest, January 15th, 1927. Someday, you are all going to hear and see a lot of the little girl shown in this picture, shaking her finger at a microphone. Her name is Phyllis Kono, 4 years old, whose mother is a descendant of the Emerald Isle, and whose father came from the island of Japan. The Konos all live very happily in Atlantic City, where Daddy Kono is a successful merchant. Phyllis, who first opened her eyes on this earth only a little over 4 years ago, carries on a conversation with her playmates and elders with precise English, and a vocabulary that is little less than astounding. Recently, she passed some screen tests for one of the largest American producers, and was pronounced a find. She has a vivid imagination. The director tells her the situation, and she goes through the business with the fidelity of reality. Called upon to entertain, Phyllis evolves her own presentation. She has been introduced to several radio audiences in Atlantic City and New York. For such occasions, she generally sings. If she does not remember the right word, she substitutes another that serves just as well. Psychologists have taken a keen interest in this unusual little person. She is rated as a 14-year-old. Her mother and her father are both of cultured families, and Phyllis seems to have inherited the best of the two races. Children's Hour at KHJ so good that even grown-ups delight in hearing it. Radio Digest, January 15th, 1927. Children's hours, like children's books, ever hold a charm for many grown-ups. This is undoubtedly one reason why Children's Hour at KHJ, Los Angeles Times, the oldest broadcasting station in the city, has become such a popular feature of the evening's entertainment in Radioland. Uncle John, who is known all over the country for his genial announcing, together with the Sandman and Little Queen Titania, have brought many a youngster from a good many miles distant to the visitor's room at KHJ for a glimpse of the elusive fairy who has helped to turn the bedtime hour for the wee ones throughout the city into one of so much pleasure. So popular have the stories become in which these three well-known artists have appeared for the past several years that they were recently compiled into book form, beautifully illustrated, and met with great popularity among the admiring friends of Radioland. Queen Titania, whose sweet voice has carried many a youngster into the realm of fairy castles and fairy folks, is herself a most elf-like little lady to meet, with her fair, fragile beauty and head of blonde curls. Another attraction of the Children's Hour is the impromptu talk between Uncle John and Little Richard Hedrick, whose photograph accompanies this story. The picture shown here is reproduced from a beautiful oil painting which hangs in the broadcasting studio as the gift of appreciation from an artist friend of Radioland. Nor must we forget the sweet contralto singer of beautiful lullabies and children's songs, Lenore Killian, known as the Lullaby Girl. Then two little boys who are lovers of dogs also come in for their share of attention. For there is the nightly interesting talk by H.M. Robertson, the dog man, or dog fancier as he is called, who tells the boys and girls about the latest style in canines and how to feed and care for them. The lessons in history by the radio historian, Professor Sylvester Herzog, have likewise become a feature of the Children's Hour, which is conducted daily from 6:30 to 8 p.m. Pacific Time. Highlights of the Air. Radio Digest, December 15th, 1926. If there is one time in all the year when the radio fan feels vindicated for his interest in broadcasting, it is at Christmas time, when the ether is so full of gay music that the dials fairly turn themselves. Carols which used to greet the ear on Christmas morning, sung by strolling minstrels, now fill every home with a radio set. One of the elaborate performances to start the holiday season is the broadcasting of Patience by the Play Arts Guild of Baltimore over WBAL, Friday, December 17th. Besides Patience, the Dairymaid, Reginald's Bunthorne, Archibald Grosvenor, the Poets, a chorus of rapturous maidens and officers of the Dragoons, make this a colorful broadcast. The Messiah will be given from coast to coast by various groups of choral singers. The College and Brookings Chorus will give this well-known composition December 19th at the College Station, KFDY, Sunday, December 26th. KLDS also gives a performance. Sunday afternoon, December 19th, the University of Iowa Glee Clubs will sing The Righteous Branch from WSUI. Carolers chanting their songs under candlelit windows, Scrooge, the grasping, scraping, clutching old sinner who did not have Christmas in his heart, Tiny Tim piping God Bless Us Everyone, will come to life before KOA's microphone Christmas Eve in a radio dramatization of Dickens' immortal Christmas Carol. The Cleveland Symphony Orchestra, with two successful radio concerts behind the organization, will broadcast again through WTAM December 16th beginning at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Between announcements, short sketches of the music and composers will be given. The holiday season finds our old friend WOAW appearing on the ether waves with the new call WOW. When this station uses its new call, it will also go on the air with a brand new broadcasting equipment, with a minimum power of 1,000 watts and a maximum of 2,500 watts. Young advertising writers and even veterans will appreciate the talks being given this month on advertising from WOR. December 16th, 23rd, 30th, and January 6th at 8:30 p.m., William C. Freeman will tell why the human element is the biggest thing in advertising today. Mr. Freeman knows his subject because he has probably sold more advertising than any other advertising man today. The old year has faded away to radio, and the new year has been heralded in by broadcasting stations for several years. In a coast-to-coast Happy New Year radio program, numbers of which will be dedicated to the various states of the Union, WEMC, the Radio Lighthouse, will broadcast especially for the Atlantic and Pacific Coast states. WEMC also announces a sermon by Mr. Westworth, its staff pastor, to be delivered during the first hour of the new year. The vision of better Americanism that sports broadcasting has given to me. By J. Andrew White. Radio broadcast, October 1924. I am often asked why I specialize in sports. The answer is, I don't. The Democratic Convention is a notable exception, and I good time myself occasionally by directing informal programs of the midnight frolic variety. But the descriptive broadcasting I do for the sport classics is of a distinctive character, and that makes these events linger longer in the minds of listeners. Incidentally, that goes two ways. The pleasantest recollections of radio I hold, too, center upon reporting athletic conflict, not so much because of enjoyment of the thrill of combat. I really don't get much pleasure out of viewing the events themselves. The work is hard and the concentration a terrific strain, but because of the sense that something has been accomplished when it's all over. It means a whole lot more than entertaining the public. Opinion is molded, and with it, character, and even spiritual betterment, along with the physical. Sounds funny to deal with sport broadcasting this way, but let me show you. This morning's mail, for instance, held two letters which particularly caught my attention. One bears the signature of a nationally known banker, and his message to me is that he used my fight description of the night before as an object lesson for his 12-year-old son, to impress upon him how in dealing with the public one must be uncompromisingly conscientious, and that this was an example of observance of the most rigid standards of impartiality and lack of prejudice. The other letter was written by the head of the greatest industrial enterprise in America. It is just a note of congratulation and approbation, but there is much to be read between the lines. Now, I don't know either of these men, probably never will meet them. But when an industrial giant who controls a billion-dollar business takes time out of a busy life to listen to my description of a sporting event and is impressed sufficiently by it to write me in complimentary vein, certainly it is a fair assumption that he will turn a sympathetic ear to any proposals for athletic recreation among his thousands of employees. And that is good for industry and humanity. As for the banker father who used the sport broadcasting to impress upon his son the principles of square dealing and integrity, that certainly needs no comment. See what I mean? I could multiply these examples 100 times. Entertainment, of course, is the primary object of tying up radio to sporting events, but it can be seen from these two instances that the thing goes much deeper. Never in the wildest flights of imagination could I have anticipated, at the inaugural of broadcasting, the tremendous power for good which radio has become in this field alone. My correspondence is filled with letters from old folks and those of gentle nature, a high percentage of them women, and there are many clergymen too. But the letters I like best are from the youngsters. I feel that I have done something when I arouse their enthusiasm over sports, for I am just old enough to have escaped the current conception of jazz, petting, and hip flasks as requisites to recreation, and young enough to appreciate the greater joys we found in the cultivation of athletic skill, and how the girls of my time shared these views with us, and found plenty of vent for their enthusiasms. Mature people enjoy a thrill. To younger ones, excitement is a necessity. And somehow I can't get over the idea that those thrills which accompany a contest for athletic supremacy are the real ones after all. If radio awakens that idea, and I am instrumental in putting over the revival in interest, well, that is a big enough broadcasting mission for me. Listenin' in. Radio Fans and Fancies as seen by George Lux. Vanity Fair, January 1929. The Dirt. Miss Haverstraw is shocked. She has tuned in on a hot song hit, Not Tonight Dearie, sung by a brazen nightclub hussy. But will Miss H tune out and try a symphony? No. Not tonight, dearie. She will listen to The Awful End, and really enjoy it. Beauty's Bower. How to be beautiful and stay so is the item which Miss Pringle is following so feverishly. Hair, says the loudspeaker, will be worn in short wavelengths. Although she does not know it, Miss Pringle is being kidded by an artful comedian. Health. Hubert Thurlow honestly does the 7 a.m. setting up exercises to the music, as per instruction. That is, he has for 2 cold mornings. But a mass meeting of sub-resident tenants will undoubtedly stop all that, and maybe Hubert won't be glad. The open spaces. A mighty Nimrod and open-air sportsman is Brawny Bill Duffel, who revels in tales of tarpon, tigers, elk, and elephants. Having combed the ether for 10 minutes, the best sporting event he can locate is a farm expert's lecture on our domestic fowl and their parasites. Information. Huggins is ill. It is all his own fault. He never should have gone to those last 5 places. While refreshing his low-ebb vitality, he feverishly paused the dials, hoping to learn how General Motors stands, what the weather is like, and incidentally, what day it is. Radio broadcast, October 1924. Robert M. LaFollette, United States Senator from Wisconsin. This is the first national political campaign in which radio has played its part as a medium of public information. In millions of homes, the proceedings of the 2 old party conventions were heard as plainly as in the convention halls. Throughout the campaign, more people will catch the voices of various candidates and their spokesmen than have ever before been heard from the platform in American history. The consequences of this great stride toward giving the people a first-hand knowledge of political debate can hardly be estimated. Undoubtedly, it will serve to minimize misrepresentation in the news columns of the press. The most reactionary newspapers will fear to twist facts which thousands of its readers receive directly by radio. Well, you made it to the end of the video, so here's your random bonus photo. Some of you might be aware of this, but others might not. YouTube likes to push longer videos, which is part of the reason I make these compilations. They generally perform better than the shorter videos that make them up, and generate more ad revenue to keep this channel going. So watching and sharing these videos especially helps out. Anyway, that's all for now, all you sheiks and gals out there, but stay tuned for more tales from the Jazz Age.